Good morning. One of the more disastrous mistakes Watchtower made was in forgetting that we are alien residents in this world, so we obey the government of whichever land we happen to live in. But Watchtower didn't want that. Oh no, we're kings, we're going to rule in the new world, so we're going to rule now. We don't need the police forces, we don't need the courts, we'll do all that ourselves. So they set the elders up as a sort of government, gave them a lot of really bad rules, and the results were disastrous because elders weren't qualified. Now in Exodus it says we must not follow after the crowd for anything that's bad. We have to stand on our own feet, but that comes with difficulties of its own. So if we didn't follow after Watchtower's crowd because of their unscriptural and really dangerous practices, we were going to suffer. We were going to be disfellowshipped, shunned, lose our families, we were going to be lonely. Every one of us was affected in a different way. So how do we cope with that? Well, we can stand on our principles. But on top of all of that, we have world conditions which are horrendous at the moment. Floods, fires, loss of livelihoods, loss of homes, and now we've got earthquakes one after the other. How are we going to get through this if we don't have a crowd to back us up? Well, not all crowds are bad. In Luke chapter 7, there's an interesting crowd here. Jesus was approaching a town called Nain, and he had his disciples with him, and a great crowd had followed him. He was performing the most wonderful miracles. But they met another crowd coming out of this little town of Nain. And it says, as he drew near to the gate of this town, there was a man who had died and was being carried out by the residents of the town. He died, he was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. So she was completely now on her own. She might have had a few well-wishers from the crowd that were going with her, but really, in reality, she was on her own. So when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said, "Do not weep." Then he came up and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." It's easy to say, isn't it? Just, I knew you did, but get up. And the young man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. So he was now there to support his mother in her old age. Now the crowd, fear seized them all, but they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." And the report about him spread throughout the whole region. Now that crowd at that moment had faith in what Jesus was doing, or they were extremely grateful for what he was doing for all the sick people. Were they going to develop the love of Christ that was necessary for them to stand on their own feet without a crowd around them? The reason being that later on a crowd arose that was against Jesus, and if you didn't go along with that crowd, then you were thrown out of the synagogue. So would you have the strength of character to stand firm for your own principles, for what is right? Well, now we don't really need strength of character. We need something else. And I'm going to read you some lovely verses from chapter 3 of Ephesians. According to the riches of God's glory, he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. So we are strengthened with power through God's Spirit in our inner being. And then in verse 19, we have the love of the Christ that surpasses knowledge. It's better than knowledge. The love of the Christ will give us the strength that's needed to stand on our own. Now, if we can find a crowd that's serving God and that we can attach ourselves to them, then fine, that's grand. But we might have to face up to being on our own. But we're not on our own because, of course, we have our Father and we have Jesus Christ, who showed compassion for a widow. He will show compassion for us in whatever we're going through in these difficult last days. So God be with us all. God bless.